Hi. It's on. Good, thanks. Hi. So yeah, the session is called How to Run an Indie Game Studio Like You Mean It. I've been meeting some of y'all during the event and just talking a bit about what you're making, what you're doing. And there's a few things that I think would be good to talk about just in general, about more of the business side of things. We're going to touch on the creative side of things a little bit as well, because they kind of go together in game development. So we're going to be touching on a lot of stuff. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rami Ismail. I used to run a game studio called Flambeer. I made something called press kit, which is a free tool that independent developers can use to make press kits of their video games. I run a games conference called GameDev.world. It's an online games conference. It's in 8 languages. And any speaker can speak in any of those languages, and we will live translate all content to the other 7. So it's a really cool way to learn a bit more about games from people that you normally wouldn't be able to listen to, and also to speak to audiences that you normally can't listen to. I used to run a panel at the Game Developers Conference called Number One Reason to Be. It was a panel about people from around the world making games and hearing about how people in different countries, different places, what challenges they have, but also what unique circumstances they have, what unique stories they can tell, what their mythology, their culture, their history, their storytelling can bring to games that otherwise wouldn't be available. I write a newsletter called Leveling the Playing Field, which is a free newsletter that you can subscribe to right now that has tips on the business, production, marketing, and design of video games. And I tweet way too much, like frankly an embarrassing amount of tweets. If you like your Twitter to be more than 1 person, do not follow me ever. Because it's just like 27 tweets from me on one day. It's a bit much. Now, before we really get started, there's a disclaimer I started putting at the start of my talks, and it's a fairly important one. And I started giving it because I do a lot of talks. I speak at a lot of conferences, and one of the things that after a few years you start getting very scared of is that people will just believe you. And that's really scary because sometimes I'm wrong, or sometimes what I say isn't right for you, right? So whenever I get on a stage nowadays, I realize that the stage kind of holds a power that makes you sound smarter than you are. Now, for anybody that you've listened to on a stage today, just remember that that's just an opinion, it's just a story, it's just a perspective. It's not necessarily true, it's not necessarily correct, and it might not be right for you, right? So I think it's useful to give a little bit of context as to who I am and what I do, so that for the next 45 minutes or so, when I'm going to be talking, you understand why I'm saying some of the things I'm saying. So I started independent development about 15 years ago. I started making games when I was 6. Changed the line of code in an old tutorial file for QBasic, for those of you who remember that. Realized that you can type words into a computer, and then when you type words, video games happen. Just kind of kept chasing that for the rest of my life. Didn't think it was a real job, neither did my dad. My dad's Egyptian, and he said you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, or a disgrace to the family. So I picked disgrace to the family. Went to Game Design University, hated it, deeply hated it, dropped out. There was one other guy who dropped out. I really hated that guy. We started a game studio together because he was the only other dropout. And that was Flambeer. That was how my story started. We made a game called Super Crate Box, which was IGF nominated within 6 months of us starting the studio. We did a game called Radical Fishing, which we sold for $10,001 to one of those Flash game websites that people used to play games on when they were trying to skip out on computer class. Then we were Devolver Digital's first published indie game, Serious Sam the Random Encounter. We did a first-person shooter for a Kickstarter when Kickstarter barely was a thing. I did a mobile game for iOS that won Apple Game of the Year in the first wave of iOS games. I helped Microsoft and PlayStation and Nintendo set up their indie strategies. the main thing you need to know is when we started, when indies started about 15 years ago, there was just one definition for it. It was, we didn't have a publisher. Actually, we hated publishers. The whole idea of publishers disgusted us. Because the whole point of indie was that nobody could tell you what you were going to make. That's the fucking point, right? And you didn't need publishers. You know what the biggest competition was when it came to marketing back then? There was a dude named Alexander Bruce, and he would go to events in a pink suit, who would always wear a pink suit. And I would ask him, why do you wear a pink suit? And he said, because everybody asks me why I wear a pink suit, and then I tell them about my video game. That was good fucking marketing. That was the best marketing trick we'd ever seen in indie games at that point. So we didn't need publishers because the budgets were smaller, and the amount of money that went into games was smaller, the scope was smaller, nobody gave a shit, which was nice. And whenever you could get your game on Steam, you were rich because there was nobody else, right? And then publishers happened. And publishers, I think, pulled the greatest trick in the history of video games, which is we didn't need publishers until there were publishers. Because those publishers, they weren't launching one game every 3 years. No, they were launching 3 games every year, 6 games every year, 10 games every year. So whenever they talk to the press, they have news. Whenever they talk to Xbox, they have games to sell. Whenever they talk to PlayStation, they have games to sell. I couldn't keep those connections going all the time. I was working on a video game. But publishers have full-time people who do that. They have budgets for marketing, and they can keep those budgets high because they're selling things all the time. So we didn't need publishers until there were publishers. And we hated that because we lost. Indie lost. We lost the race to publishers. Do you feel bad about that? Well, 10 years ago me hates it. Nowadays me, well, there's so many of us right now. Back then there was 200, 300 of us. All of them kind of like dropouts, we were all students, none of us really had like much of a life that we needed to pay for. And games were cheaper because they were smaller in scope. Now, indie is much larger. Indie games cost $300,000, $150,000, $1 million, $2 million to make. Self-funding that? No way to do it. So publishers make sense. They make sense now because there's so many indie games. There's so many different indie games being made. So we lost. Is that all bad? We'll see. But there's another point that I keep getting asked about, and it's a little bit about what I want to talk about, because it's about how to run an indie game studio like you mean it. And a lot of people running an indie game studio come with the same question every time. What is the indie apocalypse? Well, it's kind of this. So, that so many indie games were made when I started. And this is 5 years ago. This is not now. We weren't even close to that. We're far beyond this point. That thing goes through the roof forever. There's so many of us that most of us are going to fail. In fact, there's a belief that with the increased amount of games, eventually just the entire segment will fail. That indie games will become a few games that make a lot of money, and then nobody else. And with that, the bad news is that, frankly, you want to make a hit game in 2023? You're going to fail. It's not going to work. If your dream here is to make a hit game, forget about it. That's not it. No, I've been doing this for 15 years. I have good connections. I have a good network. I can reach most publishers with an email because I know the people that work there. I know the platforms. My chances of making a hit game in 2023 are pretty fucking small. So if you don't have all that, your chances are effectively zero, right? So let's forget about making a hit game. Hit game is not going to work. What we can do is try to stand out, survive, and hopefully thrive. For that, you don't have to make a hit game. The large majority of indie game studios nowadays never make a hit game, but they make more than enough money to continue making games. And that should be your goal right now as an indie studio, just to get to continue to make more games. Now, there's going to be 10 topics that I'm going to be talking about. We're going to go through them one by one, and I'm going to start with a thing that I do more often in business-related talks, which is I'm just going to zoom out a little bit to entrepreneurship, right? To what does running a company mean? Because risks is really what the definition of entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship, running a company, running a studio, basically means if you fuck up, it costs you money, right? Nobody else. If you make money, that's your money. So there's a real risk to losing money here. And really, the best way for you as an indie studio to survive is to not lose money. And the best way to not lose money is to not spend money. And the best way to not spend money is to spend somebody else's money. That's where publishers come back in. That's why we like publishers now, because we can spend their money instead. I have an entirely separate talk about that, but the short version is this. You want to make sure that for as much of your development, somebody else is paying for it. That's the reality of game development in 2023, right? Now, risk is a bit of a tricky one because there's no way to not have any risk. If you're going to be making a game, there's going to be a part that you have to self-fund, that you're going to have to make yourself. And that's never going to go away. There's also another risk, which is time. I don't know how old most of you are. I'm 34. Assuming a game takes about 2 years to make, probably have about 30 years left. That means I have 15 games left. That's it. Then I'm done. That's not a lot of games. And that's assuming I make games that get done in 2 years. I'm a game developer. I know by now, if I say 2 years, it's going to take me 2.5 to 3. Because I'm a programmer. If I've learned anything, it's that programmers suck at scheduling. We have no idea what the fuck we're doing. So, 3 years. That gives me 10 games. There's nothing. I have 10 games left to make. That's my other risk. I don't know how many games you have left to make, but it's worth thinking about. So, let's talk about some ways you can make sure that you stand out as a studio rather than just, making the next thing. The first thing, I hate this idea nowadays that people chase the market, that they make games that take 2 years to make, and then instead of making what they want to make, they try and make something that they think is going to sell. I made a list of games based on the data of what was most popular in that year. Now, assume a game should take 2 years to make, right? So you're starting a game in 2016 to release in 2018. What do you think in 2016 the market would have told you that you should make? It is a hero shooter built on the ruins of a cancelled MMO based on the popularity of MOBAs. That's what 2016 suggested, because that was the year where Overwatch came out. And everybody was talking about Overwatch. Everybody was talking about hero shooters. What do you think you should have made to make a hit in 2018? What was the biggest game of 2018? Fortnite was the biggest game of every year for the past 7 years, so that is correct. But besides Fortnite, it is a narrative-focused reimagining of a violent hack-and-slash title about murdering the entire pantheon. Yeah, it was God of War. That was the biggest thing. Okay, well, what do you think was the biggest thing in 2019? What was the game that everybody was talking about, the game that really took the market by storm? It was a game about conspiracy theorists starring a floating woman that can move things with her mind. That was Control. 2020. It was an isometric action roguelike built on the foundation of a narrative basketball game. Sorry? A lot of people were talking about Pyre. 2021, a game about divorce that you have to play together. It Takes Two. 2022, a minimalist pixel game about surviving endless hordes of enemies and upgrades. Those were the games that won awards those years. Those are the games that led the market. None of them have anything to do with each other because that's not how game development works. You can't look at the market and base your next thing on that. Now here's the thing, there are giant studios with tons of money that do market analysis. They do market analysis, they do sentiment analysis. Publishers can do that. Some publishers can do that. Most publishers won't. Because publishers are smart. They don't chase the market, they make their own market. They say, this is our identity. You can connect with it. If you connect with it, you come to us. That's why publishers, when they publish a game, actually, let's do an experiment. Who published Cult of the Lamb? Devolver. Who developed Cult of the Lamb? Something like that. Yeah, great. That's the point. The point of a publisher is that they make their own market. In fact, they're usually selling our own audiences back to us. Because they get the audience from our games. Then we want to make a next game. The only way for us to reach that audience again is to work with the publisher. That's why you will remember the publisher name, and that will be everywhere. And the developer name, well, there's a title card at the start, but let's be honest, who doesn't skip the title cards? I'm a game developer. I skip the fucking title cards. You know how long it takes to watch those animations? Hell no. I want to play the video game. So you can't really compete with the people who can do market analysis. They have giant armies of people figuring that stuff out. And they're not figuring out what's big now. No, they're figuring out what's big in 2 years, 3 years. So you go like, oh shit, everybody loves Vampire Survivors. Yeah, hell, of course they do. Does that mean you should make Vampire Survivors? No, because in 2 years, what's going to be big is going to be, I don't know, a fucking airplane simulator where you can put a lawnmower on the front. I don't know what's going to be big in 2 years, and neither do you. Nobody does. But it's going to make no sense to us now. The same way, the idea that Vampire Survivors would be the hit of the year is impossible to imagine in the year of Control. Everybody's talking about Control, and you go like, okay, what are you going to make? And you're going to go, oh, you know, I really want to make a pixel game about walking around where you can't shoot. The game will shoot for you. The fuck? But that's how it worked, right? So, business leading creativity leads to similar outcomes. If you look at the market and you go, what should we make? You'll make a thing that already exists. And the truth is, the thing that you're trying to replicate already exists better than you can make it. Because that's why it's Game of the Year. That's why we're talking about it. Unless you're fairly confident you can beat the Game of the Year, you shouldn't be making it. Because by the time you're done, it's old news, and nobody will give a shit. So it's good. It's good to pay attention. Of course I play all the games that are Game of the Year. I want to know what's good. I want to know what's happening. I want to know what people are talking about. But it's not good to have that lead your business. It can inform your business. It can inform your creativity. It shouldn't lead. If you have a smaller studio, very often it can be that the business person and the creative person is the same person. If that is the case in your studio, unless you're a solo developer, fix that. The business person and the creative person should not be the same person. Because the creative person making business decisions will lean them towards their creative vision. And a business person leaning creative, well, it doesn't create very creative games, right? If people have to switch between those brains, it's a recipe for disaster. So if you have enough people in your studio to separate those responsibilities, separate those responsibilities. If you are one person doing both, you're going to have to find a way in your mind to separate those things or to choose one or the other. But one thing should be leading. My belief is it should be creative. Creative leads, business figures out how to make a business case out of it. Speaking of business cases, your next thing is you want to test your business case. The best way to avoid running into trouble is testing your business case. Now, your business case is basically the answer to 5 simple questions. Who's making the game? Why are you making the game? What is the game? How is anybody going to make money with your game? Usually a publisher or a fund or a grant or a platform or whatever. And finally, what do you need to make the game? Those 5 questions together, that's your business case. Now, normally, like I said, we want to make sure that there's as little risk as possible. So we want to get that business case in front of people who might pay for it as soon as possible. And you want to do that before you actually make the game. how do you test a business case? Sorry? Sorry? A demo version of the game. Well, no, because that's a test of the game. But we're not talking about the game. We're talking about the business case. Yeah, early announcement, publishing. Yeah, you put it out there, right? Now here's one problem about putting it out there. We're talking about risks again, right? If I go and I talk to 100 publishers, and all of them hate my game, if I then put it on Steam, does anybody know that? That 100 publishers said no? Okay. Say I put my game on Kickstarter and I fail. And now I go talk to a publisher. Do they know that? Will they take the game? You could barely do a Kickstarter. You could do parallel. My tip, every way you can fail in private, you do that first. Kickstarter, your last resort. Nobody has to know it's your last resort. Nobody has to know. Now, if you have a giant audience that you are sure is going to just kill the Kickstarter and you make like $1 million, you're sure of it, fucking go for it. That's proof, that's evidence, that's great. But if you're not sure, don't do it. Why would you do it? Talk to publishers first. If you get enough money there, done. Sign that deal. Great. So same thing, putting the store page out there, he's correct. That does prove the business case. It proves it at a high risk though. Because if it lands poorly, that's going to work against you when you're starting to talk with publishers. A lot of publishers also, and this is not all publishers, but a lot of publishers also like when they get to do the announcement. When they can control when that happens. So keep that in mind, that when you put stuff about your game out there, of course, if it's quiet, if you just have a Twitter where you update some stuff, that's great. But if you're going like announcement, which is what you need to do to test your business case, you're taking away the publisher's opportunity to announce your game. Which again, they want you to think of them, not the developer, right? So, when you're looking at testing your business case, actually the simplest way to do it is to do exactly what you want to test it for, which is, can you get money from publishers? So how do you test your business case? Well, you pitch. You pitch. If somebody goes like, oh, this is amazing, yes, we'd love to talk about it, great, talk about it. Somebody makes an offer, your business case worked. At that point, you can reevaluate. Hell, I've pitched to publishers without intent to publish a game, just to see how they react. If all of them are like, oh, this is amazing, I'm like, okay, great, then I don't need you. Right? Because I can self-fund. You probably need funding. So in that case, pitch, see whether they like it. Keep the best conversations, keep them going, right? But tell them, hey, yeah, we'd like to develop a bit more and get to a vertical slice before we continue the conversation, because we're not entirely sure about the budget yet, we're not entirely sure about the timeline yet. But in general, we'll remember that you're interested and we'll get back to you soon, right? Done. Business case works. Now, if everybody says no, what does that mean? It might mean you suck at pitching. It might also mean that just nobody's interested in your game, which sucks. At that point, you have two options. You kill the game, or you self-publish the game. Self-publishing, really risky. 100% of the risk goes your way. Now, if you can do it and you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. I used to self-publish. But the real trick here is to get to this point so fast that if you have to decide to kill the game, it doesn't fucking matter. You just make the next one. Right? Now here's the thing. Every publisher, especially if you're a young developer, will say, we'd like to see a vertical slice. Because they don't trust you. Of course they don't trust you. They're about to give a bunch of random people $300,000. I'd like to know that you can ship, right? And if you haven't shipped before, then I'd like to see a vertical slice. I'd like to see a really good timeline. I'd like to see a really good budget. I would like to make sure that everything checks out, right? So they will say, come back to us when you have a vertical slice. You know what that means? That means not no. Which means there is a chance to continue developing it. Now, if you go to a developer right now and you say, we're making an action platformer about a dog on a skateboard, they're going to say no. I don't know why publishers at the moment do not like skateboards and they do not like action platformers. I don't think they have anything about dogs, but I just had to come up with something. So they're not going to take that game. Now here's the thing, you can spend another 6 months on that vertical slice and they're still going to say no. Because it's still an action platformer on a skateboard. So yeah, you can keep working on it, it's just not going to change anything. So if you test your business case and everybody says no, just take the loss, move on, right? And your business should be structured in such a way that when you get to that no, it doesn't hurt you too much. If you spent 1.5 years getting to the point where you first start talking about your game with publishers, you fucked up. You fucked up. That's 1.5 years of your money that you burn on something that you don't know is going to work. That should be 3 months. And it can be 3 months. It can absolutely be 3 months. I've worked with studios that are 100+ people that can get their thing done in 3 months. I've worked with teams that are 2 people that can get their prototype done in 2 months, to the point where they can show this is what it's going to be, this is how it's going to play, this is how it's going to look, this is what we need. If you can't do that in your studio, you need to reassess your processes and make sure you get here fast enough. Better for the creative person too. Iterate. Iterate fast. Try things. Break them. Fuck them up. Fix them. And assume it's not going to work. All business you do should always be with the implicit assumption that it's not going to work. There should always be a strategy for if it's not going to work. Because there's one thing I learned in game development, is that most things don't work. The healthiest way to do business is to prepare for the worst. Prepare for the worst outcome. And maybe second, prepare for the best, right? The amount of games that did really well had like a flash, a moment, where everybody was paying attention, and then their port wasn't ready, or the game was bugged, or the website couldn't take the amount of people, or the servers went down, and then it just was over. It's too many games. So you want to make sure that you are ready to deal with the best case scenario, but that you're prepared for the worst case scenario. And your worst case scenario is the game will make $0. It will sell 0 copies. Exactly 0 copies. Not even one, just 0. Not even your parents or your loved ones will buy it. Nobody buys it. There's a really sad website called Kick-Ended that's just a website of Kickstarters that made $0, and if I really want to feel shitty, I just check it, because it means not even their parents bought their Kickstarter. It's fucked up. But you should assume that your goal is to survive to the next game and that you're going to make $0 doing that. That also means one other thing. When you're talking to a publisher, the money negotiations are about 3 parts of money, right? The upfront, which is the money you get while developing the game. The pre-recoup, which is the percentage of revenue you get before the investor has earned back their investment. And the post-recoup, the amount of money you get after the investor has gotten their investment back, after they break even, right? Those 3 parts of money. A lot of indies, when they talk to me, they ask me, which one is most important? It's the post-recoup, right? I don't think so. Is it important? Yeah, it's more important than the pre-recoup. The pre-recoup, the money you get before the publisher gets their money back. A lot of publishers nowadays just say 0. You get nothing. You get nothing until they earn their money back. Some publishers, a lot of the nicer ones, 30%. A lot of the ones that do trickier business, 0%, right? Because they have to earn their investment back. So you're probably not going to make that much, but also there's a ceiling to that money. It's a percentage of how much money you got, right? And how much they spend on marketing and other shit. So in a way, that one is the only one that is both uncertain and capped. It has a maximum. So I don't give a shit about that one. I just don't. Post-recoup, now that one can go to infinite. That can be endless money. So I do think that's important. But if you're a new developer, I want you to think about what if your game makes $0. And that also is my answer. The upfront is the only money that's guaranteed. You're 100% sure getting that. So I would say, ask for more upfront than you need. Ask for more than you need for your budget. Ask for enough that you can make the game and then spend 3 to 6 months working on your next game. Ask for enough that if you get delayed, it's going to be fine. Ask for enough that no matter what happens to the economy, to your team, to how many extra people you want to hire, delays, and 3 to 6 months of time to get ready your next pitch, that you have that money. And then I don't give a shit that I make 0% on the pre-recoup because I have money to get to the next game. And if the game does amazing, we're going to be out of that pre-recoup like that. And I'll be getting the post-recoup, which hopefully I made a good deal on. Hopefully I'm getting 70%. Hopefully I'm getting 50%, right? And if the game goes that fast that a few months after launch I'm already recouping, then fuck, the game made a shit ton of money. You know what? 50% of a shit ton of money? I'll take it. That's great. That's still an amazing amount of money. So, you launch your game, you make some money, you get a good budget, you make a good deal. A lot of studios want to grow. A lot of studios just want to grow. I'm going to tell you, growing is dangerous. Growing is probably the thing that kills most studios I talk to. I talk to hundreds of studios every year, trying to help them out with their business, right? That's my job nowadays, is I help other studios survive and make good business moves. Growth is one of the most subtle killers of studios. And I think most of the pain problems, most of the pains that I talk to in studios are about growth. Because studios often grow to capacity. Oh, we can hire an additional artist. Great, they hire an additional artist. And then here comes the problem. Now they have 10 people. And their producer, well, managing 7 people, okay, 8, 9, that's getting a lot, 10. Oh, now we have 1 person too many. Okay, we should hire an extra producer. Okay, you hire an extra producer. Now suddenly, you have capacity for 17 people. You have a producer that's just sitting around. So maybe we should grow the team a bit more. And people grow the team. So now they have a bunch of programmers and an artist and a designer sitting around doing nothing. Because they don't need them, we were already making the game. Well, maybe we should start a second project. Okay, now you're making a second project. Okay, double the risk. Okay, but double the up. Okay, but now that team, the first team actually needs a little bit of extra capacity, but now the entire other team that you hired, they're working on the other game, so they don't have capacity. So either you're going to have to move them from that game, which is going to lower the chance of that game, so they might as well be sitting around, or you hire some extra people. Oh, now we don't have enough producers again. That loop just continues until the studio fucks it up. Because eventually you fuck it up. Here's the thing. There's always a challenge, right? This is sort of where we can go. My tip for you as a studio is if you can go here, go there. Just go there. You don't have to rise to the challenge. That's some bullshit. You just have to survive. You want to make a next game? No, you want to make a game that's bigger? Okay, intentionally grow. Intentionally grow. Be very careful about how you grow. Think about what that means for your organization. Think about what that means for your teams. Intentionally, carefully, one at a time. Right? What does that mean? What does that add? What does that change? Does that affect the culture? You have a team of 3, you hire 3 people, you know what happens? The entire culture of your studio is dead. Because you have an equal amount of people joining as that you had. This is not just true for small companies. I talk to studios, AAA studios, that do hiring sprees, and at the end, they're just like, I don't recognize the studio. I'm like, of course not. You hired the same amount of people you were employing, or more. Your studio culture is dead. You're going to have to redefine it from the scratch. And you might not like how it ends up, right? As the person that started it, you might not like how it ends up. So, when you grow carefully. That's one way to survive, is to not just chase whatever you can do, but think about what you want to do. Those publishers, the biggest trick we can learn from them is their branding. Not their marketing, not their budgets. They do stuff we don't want to do, right? Publishers manage funds, they do marketing work, they do booth building, they do platform relations, launch management, stuff like that. Most of you are probably game developers. Most of you probably want to make games. Be a fair assessment, I think. But what they do really well that we could learn from is thinking about how to build their brand. Because you think of a publisher, you can probably imagine a number of games that would fit with that publisher. If you walk around the show floor here, you can probably look at most of those games and go, oh, that would be a great game for that publisher. That would be a great game for that publisher. You know because they make sure you know. That's what a publisher does. And we need to be thinking about that. So when people think about brand, very often they just have a logo and a name. I would just imagine your brand as a person. Who is my company? Who are they? Are they fun? Are they weird? Do they have quirky sense of humor, grim sense of humor? Flambeer, my old studio, we said that they have a grim, dark sense of humor, but they're firmly optimistic about the future, despite the future being shit. That was kind of the idea. And if you play our games, yeah, that's what we made. What were we best known for? Screen shake. Did we lean into that? Hell yeah. The studio shut down 3 years ago. People still refer to us in any discussion about screen shake. I haven't put out a game with Flambeer, with my old studio, in 7 years now. We're still the default when it comes to screen shake. Because we didn't just pick that up. No, we owned that. What does your studio own? In 5 years, after all is said and done, what do people talk about when they talk about your studio? And if you don't have an answer to that, you need to step it up. Because the studios people will remember are the studios that are thinking about why they're memorable. Another thing to think about this is when you have your game, right? One question I always ask is, if I had a friend who played this game and they wanted to convince another friend to play this game, what would they say? And now, be a little honest with yourself, because no friend would go to a friend and be like, oh my God, I played this roguelike, there's zombies. You should play it. No, hell no. Or like, oh my God, we have a fighting game, it has 12 characters. So fucking what? Why would somebody recommend your game? And why are designers not thinking about that question? Why are companies not thinking about that question? We're thinking about like, oh, how does the feedback loop work? And we're thinking about like, okay, what engine is this programmed in? Or sort of what is the system architecture? We're never thinking about how would somebody just talk about our game? Publishers figured that one out. It's one of the first questions they ask themselves. It's how do people talk about this game? How do people talk about your game? Will they talk about your game? What is memorable about your game? What is the thing that they would say to convince friends to play that game? You build your brand. And as a brand, as a company, but also as people within that company, you want to make sure you're making meaningful connections. You're talking to people at platforms, you're talking to people in the press, you're talking to players. You want to make sure that people want to stay around. That people want to stay around your brand, that they're excited about what comes next, that they know that your studio respects them. Now, I don't say customer is king bullshit, fuck that. Absolutely not. Like, we're making the games and they can like them or not like them. If you want to take their feedback, take their feedback. Amazing, right? But you're the game designer, it's your company, you make the decisions, you take responsibility for those decisions, right? You make a bad choice because the community told you, your fault. In Nuclear Throne, when I was working on that game, there was a point where the community said the game was too easy at the start. Because it's a roguelike, every time you die, you start it back at the start. And people said it's too easy. In fact, our entire Steam forum agreed that it was too easy. So we made it harder. A few weeks later, people said, like, well, it's better, but it's still too easy, so we made it harder. A few weeks later, they said it's still too easy, so we made it harder. And eventually, one of us, and I don't remember who it was, said, we're not getting new players. We're getting sales, but like, nobody is joining the forums, nobody's talking about the game. Sales are slowing down, what's happening? Turns out, nobody could play the fucking game anymore. Because level 1 was brutal. We listened to the customer, and the customer was wrong. That's our job, to make the best game. Not what the customer wants, not what we know the customer needs, right? And sometimes they can tell you, but not always. How do you make that connection in such a way that they feel listened to, but still make the right choice, right? How do you make sure you take that feedback and still make them part of it? For us, what we ended up doing is we added a shortcut to level 1. We added something really difficult, but if you could pull it off, you can immediately skip to level 3. And then we put another shortcut on level 3. You hit that one, you can go immediately to level 5. You're going to be under-leveled, but hey, those people wanted the challenge, go for it, right? So we fixed it, just not the way they want it. That's a lot of what our job is, right? How do you make sure people feel listened to? And help out, right? Help those people out. Like, talk to them, have conversation with them. Your main thing as a brand, honestly, your main strength as a brand is consistency. So when you make branding decisions, don't make them for a year. Don't make them for 6 months. These are like 5-year kind of things. That's why there's an orange hat. That orange hat in that room right there, that's been there for how long has it been there, Alex? Yeah, 5 years, 10 years? Same thing. You need to wash that at some point probably if it's the same hat. But like, it's still the same thing. And it works because I know whenever I see that color anywhere, I know it's him or it's the company. No question about it. You know what? Everybody who's ever worked with them knows that too. That's consistency. That's the power of a brand. Power of a brand is so powerful that he owns that color in my brain now. Literally, I cannot see that. That's my national color. I'm from the Netherlands. Orange is the national color of the Netherlands. And when I see it now, I think of him. That's how powerful branding is. That's how powerful your brand can be if you're consistent. This is not a thing to be shifting around or messing around with. This is a thing you pick, you stick to it. If something doesn't work, you fix it. But if you can, you stick to it. And now I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about sincerity. And the reason I want to talk about sincerity is because when we talked earlier about don't chase the market, people go, well, then what do I make? I don't know. I don't know. All I can tell you is what I want to make. And I want to make that because I want to make that. That's the answer. That's the full answer. Yeah, of course there's business consideration. There's hundreds of games I want to make, and the ones I end up making are the ones I think will do well in the market. For sure. But I can't tell you why I want to make what I want to make. A book I read, a thing I did, a game I played, a movie I watched, a song I listened to. There's this one song on one of my Spotify playlists, and honestly, the only thing I can think of when I hear that song is, holy shit, this would be so good for an announcement trailer. And I just start dreaming up a game with it. What game would I like to announce with that song on the announcement trailer? That's where ideas come from. My most successful game comes from watching a documentary about fishing. And we were talking about duck hunt. And there was a cool shot of a fish flying in the air, and we were talking about those little plastic guns that you used to shoot at the TV at to shoot the ducks. We were like, what if you shoot the fish? Game made millions of dollars. Apple Game of the Year, Game Design Awards, Design Award, GDC Awards. That game, Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings played that game. Elijah Wood is a fan of that game because we were watching a stupid documentary and made a stupid joke about shooting fish with guns. And here we are. You want to know how you make good games? You just make the games you want to make. Don't try to make anything else, just what you want to make. Your games have a fingerprint. They have their result of who you are, right? And if you try and be anything else, it's not going to work. Because whatever you're trying to emulate, the person you're trying to emulate is better at it than you are. I'm running out of time, so we're just going to keep moving a little. And I want you to avoid the obvious. Markets move in unpredictable directions, but there's always something in the water. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a bunch of AAA devs at different studios, and they were like, oh yeah, we're working on something really cool. Can't talk about it yet. It's kind of, it's NDA stuff, but between us, doing something nobody else has done. We're setting a game, and like the setting is amazing. It's an amazing setting, man. It's going to be like feudal Japan. 4 studios. They all said the same thing. Here's the thing. The market is unpredictable, but there's usually something in the water. Usually we're all looking at the same things and we're looking for the same openings. And because of that, we all get the same result. Now it's space horror games at the moment. Indie games does that too. We have waves, and those waves, normally what you can kind of say about it is it usually takes 3 to 5 years before a wave has a masterpiece. Celeste, Hades, sort of like the summit of the genre, and then we move on. Right? Hades happened, oh, hey, Vampire Survivors, we go that way now. Cool. And then people will experiment with that, and in 3 to 5 years, there will be the game that defines that, right? The Supergiant kind of game. Top-down isometric narrative stuff. We hit that. Hades is the winner. Okay, good. Hades 2 is going to happen. Great, then we're done. Everything kind of results from the same market forces, so everybody makes the things that fit that. Why are there so many roguelike party and multiplayer games? Twitch. It's Twitch. People can infinitely play those, so it's free marketing. That's why people make roguelikes and why they're successful. They're successful because influencers can keep playing them. That's also why multiplayer games work so well. That's why party games work so well. That's going to stay that way, but everybody's doing that. If you do that too, you're just going to fall in the cracks of what everybody's doing. So try to avoid the obvious. If I say extinction, and I have to ask you to come up with a game idea, extinction. How many of you have dinosaurs in your head? It's going to be quite a bunch. Asteroids, meteors, nuclear war. People are going to have similar ideas because that's how it works, right? Now, avoiding that basically goes back to the previous point, which is just be sincere. And if you're going to do something that is a little unpredictable, fail faster. Fail faster. We talked about this, but you want to try and fail before you get to your vertical slice. A lot of developers just kind of suck at iteration. Iteration is so simple. Make a thing, test it. If it sucks, don't do it again. If it works, do it again. That's iteration, or do it more, right? If you want to fail fast, here's a bunch of tips for you. A, tell your programmer to fuck off with trying to make your code good. No, bad code. In fact, I want the code to be so fucking embarrassing that they want to burn it. I want them to cry at it when they review it. That's how bad the code needs to be, right? Your artist, I don't give a shit whether it's perfect. I just need it to work right now, real fast. Set a deadline, hit the deadline. They can fix it after we're done. Your narrative writers, I don't need the fucking story, man. I just need like a small blurb. If we have like a small part of the game, I need 5 lines of dialogue or like 1 section of dialogue. That should not take 3 fucking weeks, right? And your designer, prototype it. I don't want them thinking. I don't need a design document. I need the fucking thing playable right now. Preferably yesterday, right? That's how you prototype. None of this bullshit of it has to be good. It doesn't have to be good. It has to work. That's how you get those 3 months done. That's how you can test early enough before you're spending your own money. That's how you don't become a studio that's so stuck because they spent 2 years on a prototype and now they ran out of money. Because you don't want to be that studio. And some of you are that studio, I know from talking to you, but sorry about that. Consistency is going to be your biggest strength, so move fast, fail faster. Right? Not the VC fail faster, not spend $1 billion fail fast. No, just within your team, learn to be fast. Learn to be precise. If you're prototyping, what is the goal of prototyping? Testing whether your idea works, nothing else. Not whether it's pretty, not whether it's smooth, not whether it's optimized, does it work? You can do it on paper for 90% of video games. Just grab a Monopoly board, tear it up, draw on it, use the dice, use the cards, whatever. You can do it. You can make most games, Slay the Spire, you can make on paper. You can make that entire game on paper. That's why they made a board game out of it afterwards, because you can. You don't need to spend 6 months programming that. And then the biggest tip for how to be a successful game studio, really, is to just be more lucky. Just have more luck. Come on. You don't have enough luck. No, honestly, luck is a huge part of it. If you do everything right, it's still luck. Shall I tell you why I think I am here? I got lucky twice in a row. The first one is when I wanted to go to school, to the game design university, I fucked up sending a letter. And because of that, I wasn't allowed into the program for a year. Now that sucked. Started selling computers at a MediaMarkt, one of those big computer chains. And then a year later, I joined the school. And because of that, I was in the same class as the guy I started my studio with. Otherwise, we would have never met. The second thing is, my first game, Radical Fishing, there was a guy in Australia who sent an email to Kotaku, Australia, saying they would like a job. And that guy was like, oh, we could use somebody who lives in that time zone. Let's hire this guy. that Australian guy that got hired at Kotaku was a really big fan of a game called Sega Bass Fishing. And because of that, when our game came out about fishing with machine guns, he was like, fishing games, I like fishing games. So he checked it out and wrote an article. And that's why I'm on this stage. In the end, everything I did and every strategy I took, I can only tell you that it didn't not work. I can't tell you that any of those other 9 are why I'm here. Now, over the past 15 years, I found that studios that do these things survive longer, that they tend to do better. But there's plenty of studios who do none of this and still succeed. I can tell you there's really bad ways of running a studio that usually fail, like the studios that don't fail fast, the studios that do the obvious, the studios that don't build their brand. I can tell you those fail a lot. That could be you. So I would recommend you don't do these things, right? But in the end, you just need to be more lucky. And finally, there's not really an indie apocalypse. Yeah, more of us fail than ever. More indies fail than ever before. There's also way more indies than ever before. So, in a way, that's true. That's true. This is true, and there's going to be more and more. But here's the thing, that can't continue forever. There's a ceiling. At some point, every person that wants to make an indie game is making an indie game. Because it's kind of a bad job, y'all. Game development is kind of a bad job. Long hours, poor pay, crunch, angry customers, like, shit, what are we doing? But we like it here. That's why we're here. That's why we're sitting here. With us today, it's afternoon. We're sitting in a sweaty hall listening to me talk. Like, you must love this job a lot, right? So, when you think about it that way, there's going to be a maximum of people who actually give a shit. And despite there being more failures than ever, there's also more successes than ever. But if there's one thing that I really believe about this whole thing, about this whole situation, is that you just have to stop trying to make a hit. Everybody's trying to be the hit. Everybody's trying to make the next big thing. Fuck that. Start being a little weird thing. Start being a little indie band. That's what we're called, right? Indie. Indie, that's what we're based on. We're not based on Coldplay. We're not based on like Radiohead. We're not based on Billie Eilish. No, we're based on the people making weird shit, right? So, the market is saturated. There's more failures than ever before, and it's mostly because there's more games than ever, there's more studios than ever, there's more success than ever. It's just a numbers game, just like in photography, just as in music. If you stop trying to burn your money trying to be Coldplay, just make shit trying to survive, you might survive. Good luck.
Thank you. Very inspiring and I think terrifying in some ways. Okay, it's time for questions. So if you want something to ask, just come to the microphone and wish you luck.
Scare everybody. I think I scared everybody.
Maybe.
Hi.
Okay, I can give you
There are questions.
I catch my first. Sorry for maybe too personal question. I know I subscribe to your newsletter. The content is fucking amazing, and your talks always fucking inspiring.
Thank you.
It's rare combination. Anyway, why you stop making games yourself?
So that's a fun question. I didn't stop making games. In fact, I'm announcing a new one in the next 2 weeks. I just haven't. It hasn't been my focus. I'll be really honest. You want the honest answer? I did the same mistake every game dev does. I burned out. I just didn't take care of myself well enough. And I've been yelling about burnout for a long time, but honestly, the game that I did last with Flambeer, Nuclear Throne, we did a schedule where we released an update every week, and we did 2 live streams every week. And then in between, we had to make the fucking video game. And I think it burned us out so heavily that every time I thought I had recovered and I would start working again, within 6 months to a year, I would just like crash again. So I think I'm still burned out from like 2016, which is wild, but I just have a really hard time sitting still. So every time I feel a little better, I go back to working. And then so in 2020, when we shut down the studio, I took 2 years of rest. I said, no video games, no development. I'm just going to help other studios out because I think one of my favorite things in the world is Lego. And I was thinking about that. I was talking to my therapist about it. And they said, why do you like Lego? And I realized it's because when you're an entrepreneur, every decision you make feels like a life or death decision, right? Is this the right choice? Is this the wrong choice? Am I gonna fuck up my studio? I'm gonna fuck up people's salary. We're gonna have to fire people, like all of those thoughts. And Lego is nice because it's just a booklet that says put this brick on that brick, and then when you're done, it's awesome. Like somebody else tells you what to do, and it's always right? And I just fucking love that. So I said for 2 years, I'm just gonna work for other people. So I did consultancy, I started writing the newsletter, I started doing all sorts of things like that. And then about a year and a half ago, I started like feeling ready to make a game again. So there'll be some announcements, but yeah, I'm really glad to be sort of back in game development because whew, it sucks to not be there.
Good luck. We'll be
Thanks.
waiting.
Yeah, I hope you like the announcement when it happens.
The point about the rising below the challenge and growth, not growing too quick. I have a question. Would it be considered smart instead of just hiring people full time? You need something to be done, just get person to do it part time. When they're done, they're out.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely value in that. So contractors, scaling, outsourcing, all very powerful tools that we have to our disposal as studios. One risk you run with these is that you're not building institutional knowledge. So the knowledge of creating those things gets lost when this person leaves. And sometimes, especially if they're very good, a lot of your processes and customs become reliant on that person being there. But because they're a contractor, they might not actually be interested in a full-time position. So you want to be a little careful with where you put those, contractor positions. I think especially in art, it has become fairly common to outsource like large parts of art. But even then, in the studio, you need that institutional knowledge and you need that ability to work with your team, because there is a really big risk with contracting work that they might not be a fit, or you need to onboard them, you need to get them used to the process, you need to get them used to the hierarchy, to the processes. So it's safer from a business perspective, but it's much harder from a creative perspective unless you really sort of like cordon off, like, okay, here's a list of 55 things, here's the style, we need that done at this date. Sure, you can do that, right? But for a lot of the more creative and a lot of the more involved thing that goes into making a game, I generally think just hiring is your safer bet, but hire controlled, right? If there's a sudden spike of shit, we need a lot of stuff done, yeah, no, for sure, go for it. Like, contract. Obvious answer, but for most situation, hiring, especially in smaller teams, is safe. Cool.
Okay. More questions? Please come, make a little work for the microphone. Doesn't worth it, really? I'm going here, Come on.
Otherwise, I'll just give him my mic.
Let's do it the right way, please.
Don't want to say customer is king, but that's a long walk. We're game
It's a proof that he's really interested in talking to you.
Yeah, really nice talk. I enjoyed it. Always pleasure to listen to you and your experience. So what I wanted to ask is about managing teams and their desires. So we as managers always strive to hire most talented people, and those people always try to do their best in every aspect of work.
Yep.
And as managers, we know that better is the worst enemy of done. How you balance, or what would be your advice? How to support people? They want to spend a week on one model, and you want them to be done in one day.
Right.
And they are not happy. They can't do it, but keeping them constantly leads to burnout.
That's a very good question.
And it's the same in art, in design, in code. Every person is perfectionist. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's two answers to this. The first one is the process one, right? Like your processes need to be built in such a way that people get their work done when it needs to be done. And a large part of that is unpleasant, right? It's sort of telling people like, well, hey, I know you want to do better than this, but this is the process, and this is the process we're sticking with. And you kind of offload part of that responsibility to the process, right? And if everybody's clear on what the process is, everybody can work within it to create the best version of what they can do. As producers, you have a lot of tools for that. Most of them are be honest. Some of them are don't be honest. Like, for example, if I have a major deadline, I will always tell my team that the deadline is 2 weeks earlier, because people will fucking always push to the final date, and I will always be late with my deadline. And if the deadline is really important, I'll just tell people that the deadline is earlier, right? I won't do that always, so they won't just know that they can take 2 weeks longer, because that would fuck it up. But for really important deadlines, I will always give myself more time than we actually have, right? The second one is more of a personal one, right? Because we're dealing with people, and honestly, the hardest thing about game development, if you're managing or if you're leading, is that people are people, right? And they have wants and needs, and especially if they're creatives and they're good and they're capable and they know that they're good and they're capable, they will always believe that they know better than the manager, which they do. They do. In fact, a good artist is better than a producer at art, right? The trick I've learned is to sort of take the one for us, one for you approach. So what I will generally do is basically go like, okay, listen, this needs to be done, but I know you really care about getting this thing done. So after that, I've opened up a week and a half for you to just work on that model the way you want to. And then one thing that's really important to emphasize is to make clear that the quality of that asset cannot exceed too far the quality of the other assets, because then they create an excuse to work on all the other assets. So you want to be very careful with that and basically say, okay, here's the style, and if you lock down that style and they have to work within the style and that fidelity, then you can basically say, okay, here, you have a week and a half to just like touch up stuff that you need, or 2 weeks to touch up stuff that you want to do, and you can take the entire team and just do that. But the system of one for us, one for you works fairly well in general, because people get the feel they get to be creative and that they can excel at their work. You get to get your deadlines and your assets done, and a lot of it is just talking and being honest with people and just saying like, listen, we need the game to be done. If you do it at this quality, we have 3 levels, you won't have a job. Like, I don't know how close you are with the people you work with or how big the team is. If it's a large enough team, don't say you won't have a job. But if it's like 3 friends, you can say that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're out of time. So thank you, Rami, for this great speech.
Thank you.